I've done a couple of videos already about roosters, but I realized I haven't actually done a video all about why roosters are so awesome and why you should have one if you can have one. So today we're going to get into all the reasons why roosters are fantastic and they belong in your flock. If you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I like to copy nature as closely as possible because I believe that gives us the best outcomes, because nature has got this figured out and has had it figured out for a lot longer than we've been around. So I like to have a rooster in my flock because that's what happens naturally. There are roosters and hens together in flocks. They form sort of a family unit, and that's what I want to copy because that's going to give me a calm flock, a flock that is doing the things that a flock should. But what are those things? Well, a rooster has a really important job in the flock. His job is to be the top guy. So once he's grown up, he's fully mature, which means he's sort of at least 9 to 12 months old. He can't really do his job until he is actually a grown-up rooster. But once he's a grown-up rooster, his job is to be the boss and care for the hens. He's there to protect them. He's there to keep an eye out on everything that's going on. He knows where his hens are. He knows where the birds are in the trees that might be a threat. He knows where the cat is. He knows where the dog is. He knows where the people are. He needs to keep an eye on everything that's going on in order to make sure that his flock is okay and that nothing is going to happen. And he will learn what things are a threat and are not a threat as he grows up and gets used to the environment he lives in. But that is what he does. He walks around, he stands around, he looks around, and you might think, wow, my rooster doesn't seem to do a lot. He's doing a huge amount. He is constantly paying attention to everything in the environment. Now, hens can do that too, and if there's no rooster doing that job for them, they will do that, but they're just not as good at it because that's not really what they're supposed to be doing. You will see that sort of behavior from a hen with chicks. She becomes very much like a rooster in that instance in terms of constantly knowing where her chicks are and viewing the environment constantly for danger and calling her chicks and finding food for them. Well, a rooster does all of those sorts of things too. It's amazing how similar the two things are. A rooster will call his hens over when he finds something for them to eat. He doesn't just gobble it up for himself. Well, a good rooster should call his hens over. And those are the sorts of things that he should be doing. And if you've got a good rooster, he will be doing that. And it's fascinating to watch his role, his job, as he looks after his flock of hens. So going back to the point about the rooster being the boss in the flock, that's really important because one of the things that he does is to keep a calm, peaceful flock amongst the hens. Now, hens like to squabble with each other. They like to have their little power plays and their dominance battles, and it can get quite aggressive. But it's not likely to get excessively aggressive if you have a rooster in your flock because he will step in and just stop that behavior in its tracks. He just does not tolerate hens picking on each other. He'll let them have their little squabbles here and there, but the minute it gets serious, he is there saying, absolutely not, this isn't happening. And that just keeps things so much calmer. I've had flocks without roosters before, and the hens are constantly just sort of jabbing at each other. They're just grumpy about it, and they might be fine one moment, and then they're just cranky the next moment. Well, with the rooster, the hens are happy. And they do not pick on each other. And if they try, the rooster comes in and says, no, thank you. We're not having that behavior here. And that's great because you, the human, don't have to intervene. Since I've had roosters in my flock, I have not had to intervene on any aggression-related behavior in my chicken flock at all. And that also includes when there have been young roosters running around, not grown up yet. So in that case, we would call them a cockerel. So when they're cruising around, also haven't had to intervene because the big boss man rooster, he makes sure there is no unacceptable behavior going on in the flock, which is a relief to me, the chicken keeper. And the rooster looks after hens who aren't doing so well as well. Now, he's not, going to make them a packed lunch and make sure that they're totally okay. He's not a nursemaid, but he stops the other hens from picking on them or interfering with them. So that is also really good and helps me to relax. And it's really interesting to see the protective behavior of a rooster, and I see this quite often when I am bringing my broody hens from where they've decided to sit and taking them to broody hen jail. And they squawk and they make a fuss and they basically announce that the sky is falling and I'm going to murder them. And the rooster will come running to see what is going on, what is attacking his hen. And when he sees it's me, he just kind of goes, "Oh, it's you," and wanders off. But he comes. He hears the distress of the hen and he comes to check it out. And that is the mark of a good rooster. And if you have one of those roosters in your flock, you've got yourself gold. One obvious benefit to having a rooster in your flock is that you can then have a self-sustaining flock. You can breed your own chickens to replace chickens as they get older. And that is a really, really lovely way to keep your flock numbers where you want them to be. You're not having to bring chickens in from other places, and you're not having to go through the hassle of trying to find hatching eggs, because when you're buying fertilized eggs to hatch under your own hens, which I do recommend if you don't have a rooster, it's a great way to bring hens and pullets into your flock. But if you can avoid having to ship eggs or go and pick them up and bring them in the car and rattle them all around, oh, that's much better. If you can go out and collect that day's fresh eggs to set under your hens, well, that is fantastic. And you might end up with some sneaky chicks that a hen just decides to arrive with. And I mean, I love bonus chicks. I have a few hens who have been bonus chicks in my flock, and while you sort of have to adjust to that, I think it's a net positive, but that could also go into the negative category of having a rooster. There is the possibility that a hen will show up with chicks when you're not expecting it. In my opinion, roosters have really entertaining personalities compared to hens. My hens are great and very, very entertaining, but the roosters are a level above in terms of their interaction with people and just their expression and the sort of antics they get up to. So I really enjoy having them in the flock because they provide me with extra good chicken entertainment in the backyard. And they're just really cool guys, and it's nice to see them just chilling, being their rooster selves, and they're much less animated than the hens, which means you've got a bit more time to sort of hang with them. My roosters are happy to come and just hang out with me, being chill, whereas the hens are always off on a mission somewhere, doing something. They've got places to be. The roosters, I think they like just having a break because it's a pretty tough job being a rooster. My roosters know that I am the person, the being that looks after them, that looks after the flock. So when I'm out in the backyard, I think they can take a little bit of a break because I'm sort of taking over the job of looking and listening and making sure things are okay. So they'll often come and hang out with me. You might have seen it in some of the videos that my roosters will come and hang out with me. They'll come and hang out and I think just take a break because honestly, sometimes they get really stressed out. We're going to talk about that in a minute, about how many hens you can have per rooster. Sometimes I think they're sort of like they've been mall shopping with their wife all day. That's kind of the expression that they have. They get pretty worn down looking after their hens if they're doing a good job. So it's nice that they can come and just hang out and take some chill time next to me. So how many hens do you need to have per rooster? Well, that is a sliding scale, but sort of a good place to start is 1 rooster for 10 hens. Now, if you haven't got 10 hens, you can still have a rooster, but sort of the breeds that you have do play into it. So a lighter breed, a more egg-laying type of breed is going to be a lot more active. And so from that perspective, a rooster from those sorts of breeds, like a leghorn rooster or something like that, they might need to have more hens compared to the kind of big dual-purpose roosters that I have. They're very chill. I would say chill to the point of being lazy. They're fine if they just have like 5 hens each. At the moment, I have 22 hens and 2 roosters, and that seems to be working pretty well. The roosters seem pretty chill, but if I just had 1 rooster and 20 hens, well, he'd be getting really stressed out trying to keep on top of that many ladies. So it is also about making sure you don't have too many hens for your rooster, as it is about making sure you don't have too few. Because if you've got a good rooster who's doing his job, he's going to be trying to look after everybody, and at a certain point, there's just too many hens. And that's why I have 2 roosters. I don't really need 2 roosters from the perspective of my breeding program, but when I only had 1 rooster, he was getting really stressed out. And as soon as his son that I kept, and he helped raise up his son to being a great rooster, as soon as he was in and on board and a grown-up rooster, the original guy, his stress levels just went down. I could see how much happier he was that he actually had some help. So that is good. It's about observing your flock. It's about making sure you know your hens and your roosters, and you can just see, is this working or is this not working? So I can't really answer that question precisely because it's really quite up to the individual flock, but you can work on a basic ratio of 1 rooster to 10 hens and sort of move up and down depending on the behavior of your flock. So if you've decided that you absolutely need to have a rooster in your flock right now, how do you introduce a rooster to your flock? Well, I'm going to tell you the way I would recommend that you do it. So let's assume that you have a flock of mature hens, so those are hens that are laying eggs, and you're like, I'm getting a rooster. Go and find a fully grown rooster. So a rooster that is at least 12 months old, and ideally you will be able to go and visit that rooster and see him interact with some of the hens in his environment. That might not always be the case, in which case, you just have to kind of take it on faith. But get a mature rooster, because your hens are going to accept a fully mature rooster. They're not necessarily going to accept a young rooster who's not ready to take that head boss role yet. So, to avoid problems, make sure it's a fully grown rooster that you go and get. You bring him home, you pop him into some kind of cage that is enclosed away from the rest of the flock, but where they can see him. And then the hens will come in and they will say hello, and he will say hello to them, and they will all be very interested in each other. And, just see how you feel it's going as to how long he needs to sort of remain separated. It might only be a couple of hours, or it might be a day or 2, depending on how cautious you want to be. And then let them out together and observe carefully that nothing is going terribly wrong. There might be some small arguments, but generally speaking, mature hens should be happy to accept a mature rooster, and there shouldn't be too much aggression going on. Now, chickens can have a higher level of aggression than we might expect to see. They're not exactly polite with each other. So provided there is no blood being drawn, I would say just step back and watch, let it play out. But if it starts to get very serious and you're worried that there is going to be blood coming, well, then you do need to intervene. But you're hopefully not going to have that issue. Generally speaking, like 99% of the time, if you introduce a lovely, mature, wonderful rooster to your flock of mature hens, they're going to be very, very happy about it. I've talked about the positives of having roosters, while there are a few negatives. The biggest negative is that roosters are loud. They crow a lot. They don't just crow in the early morning. Sometimes they crow in the middle of the night. Their version of when dawn arrives is quite different from your opinion. So you might think the sun comes up at 5 a.m. and they think it comes up at 3 a.m. and that's when they start crowing. So I am not gonna lie, they are loud, they crow a lot, and the more roosters you have, the more crowing there is, because they have little crow conversations back and forth with each other. And this is the main reason why a lot of people are not allowed to keep a rooster where they happen to be. I'm lucky I'm not in a place where that is an issue, but further into town, you're not allowed to have a rooster, and definitely generally you can't have one in a city. So that's the main downside to roosters. You do get used to the crowing, but your neighbors might not get used to it. So do keep that in mind before you take the plunge. And then the other negative is that roosters can be unpredictable and you don't always know what you're going to get. Most roosters, most of the time, are great, but some roosters are not great, and there might not be anything you can do about that. They can be aggressive to the hens, they can be aggressive to people. It's usually more likely that they're going to be aggressive to people rather than hens. As I talked about in the Raise Roosters Right video that I did, it's just an issue with how they're viewing the role of the person. They might become aggressive to the person, but some roosters are just aggressive. They just are, and there's not going to be anything you can do about it except for get rid of that rooster. Now that doesn't happen very often, especially if you try and follow the steps right and treat your roosters, respect the role that they have in their flock, but it can happen. And it can happen for no discernible reason, because chickens are chickens. And as people, we don't understand them completely, and they don't understand us completely. So it can happen. And rooster aggression can be quite serious, it can be quite scary. So try to avoid it, but if you can't avoid it, get rid of that rooster and try again. Just because you've had a bad experience doesn't mean that the next rooster you have is going to be a bad guy. And from that perspective, keeping to the dual purpose, the bigger, sort of the slower, the chiller breeds of chickens is going to give you a higher likelihood of just having a chill dude rooster than the sort of more flighty, lighter bodied breeds of chickens. But again, roosters are individuals and it can go either way. Lots of people have a lot of terrible stories about roosters. I have no terrible stories about roosters. But it can happen, and you do have to be aware of the risks you're taking when you introduce a rooster to your flock. So these are all the reasons why I love roosters, and I love having roosters in my flock. I know I've already done a couple of videos already about roosters, but I think it's really important to understand just how important roosters are to a good functioning chicken flock, because I see a lot of rooster hate on the internet, on YouTube, a lot of people having a lot of problems with roosters, and they're not that bad. You know, they're actually fantastic. It's only a few roosters in some specific circumstances that cause problems. Most of them are great guys and provide absolutely essential services to their hens.